All right, so patch 0.3, Path of Exile's 2, new and first full-on league, the Abyssal League, has hit its first controversy and it's not out yet. Let's go, boys. So let's kind of break it down. The first one here, if you've watched the trailer of the Abyss League upcoming here, I mean, it's basically impossible not to, get at least somewhat hype when you're watching this trailer. I mean, they've answered a large amount of the questions and feedback people have asked for. We have a new act to play. You got some new chase items, new supports. They've basically increased build variety pretty massively. We also have, although, that's a bit of a talking point, which is part of the point of the video here. We'll talk about in just a moment. But we also have solutions to things like new additions to crafting. And of course, the trading system that literally everybody was asking for, a way to be able to automate trade where you don't even have to go and try to trade with somebody or send a response and then, you get ignored or the person's AFK or the person just, tries to scam you or something. We have solutions to some of the more annoying things that are in Path of Exile 2 currently at the moment, including, by the way, additional movement speed in the form of sprinting, though that one remains to be played with by the people. It seems like, people are, let's say 70-30 on that one or so, something like that. But there also was, and honestly, I would not blame you if you didn't read all these. There was a very large patch notes drop. It took me several hours to read all of these, and these are a bit controversial. I wouldn't say heavily controversial, but definitely there is some head scratchers in here. Now, if you look at how meaty this is a very thick and I would say somewhat thorough patch notes for things that are currently already in the game getting changed. There are some additions and they add some new skills, etc. in here you can see. But I mean, these are pretty thick patch notes. And a lot of these patch notes reactions we're going to be talking about here are coming from the fact that you can actually see the changes to these skill gems that are listed here. Now, just right off the bat, some of these look really interesting and make me curious to try it. Like, Arc now counts as a projectile, for instance. And, if you didn't know, one of my favorite builds of all time was sort of a Palpatine, like lightning, just as much lightning as I can get bouncy around type build I did in Path of Exile 1, which this actually looks kind of fun to try. So there's some things in here, and Hollow Palm from the Monk. That one I accidentally leaked in one of my videos forever ago. That was one of the leaks. And by the way, speaking of that, it was very hard not to leak any of this trailer that was coming or the excitement I had around it because I knew how much stuff was coming. And of course, there was that one fucker that decided to leak basically the entirety of the patch that ended up getting his website taken down because of it, but we won't talk about that. So there are some things here, throughout the patch notes that are actually quite exciting. I'm looking forward to play. Speaking of looking forward to play, we have to mention the Druid. Obviously, the Druid is not in 0.3. If you didn't see my previous interview or the short we posted about it, they answered that basically if they focused on trying to get the Druid out in time, they don't think they would have had the dev power to basically both create the Druid and get it in within 0.3, but also be able to produce all the content that they had. And because they're date locking now, as opposed to locking what's making it into the next update, they didn't want to miss the August 29th and push it back for Druid. So it was either delay and get Druid in, or wait for next release. And they confirmed in the interview I did that, or not in the one I did, but in the one Destin did actually, that the Druid will be in the next release. So Druid is finally confirmed for next league. All right, but back to talking about the patch notes here. So where's the controversy arrive, and why is it a little bit of a head scratcher in some of these scenarios? Well, I'll just talk about for me here. I'll give you the quick breakdown of why this is because there's kind of a whiplash a bit from you watch the trailer. It's like super exciting. They're talking about everything buffed. In fact, if you look at their graphic up here, it says right here that like all classes buffed, etc. And there were actually some pretty cool additions. And again, we don't know all the notables and the new supports and all that in the full picture, but from what you can read actually in the patch notes, there are actually significant amount of nerfs throughout the patch. Just to give you some notable examples, I mean, I have started Warrior pretty much every single time that there was a economy restart, every time I did a private league or every one of their not leagues, basically every single time I have started Warrior. And this is the first league which there's no way I'm going to start Warrior. Let's talk about that real quick. So if you're a warrior player and you're wondering why, you probably see some conversations related to the warrior currently going on. So there was a buff to block, and then kind of in classic, like give you something, take something away, there was also a nerf to block. So blocking no longer is limited to strikes and projectiles by default. All hits that are not specifically unblockable, like the red flash ones, can be blocked, meaning you can block fucking everything. And this might sound pretty good because that in and of itself is actually pretty good until you read this line right here, which is players, minions, and monster max blockman chance is now 50%, previously 75. So the way math works here is if you're blocking 75%, you're only being hit 25% of the time. But if block chance is now 50%, now you're hitting or being hit 50% of the time, effectively doubling how often you're being hit. So this makes block half as good. Now you might say to yourself, well, hey, like, but now we can do all hits that are not specifically unblockable. Okay, but how often are you dying from like a ground degen? You're gonna want to ask yourself, am I willing to block half as often to block things that I currently am feeling like are hitting me? Probably not. Actually, currently in the game, block is very strong. I mean, it is very, very strong. It is one of the reasons that Smith of Katava, it compared with the high elemental res, solves a lot of the defensive issues at the moment. Currently, Smith of Katava is actually pretty good. And Smith of Katava did receive some nerfs in this patch. I actually personally don't really have complaints about the Smith of Katava nerfs because I understand like it's perfectly fine. And just to give you an example here, like if we go to Smith of Katava, body armor now has 35% of armor applied with elemental damage from hits. We're going to talk about this in a moment, but previously caused the body armor grant +5 and maximum fire res. So, they're nerfing that a bit. They're nerfing the health life regen here a little bit. And they're nerfing the small fire passive. Honestly, this is fine because this being able to get 88% or something like with very low effort. This was basically the SSF, it's particularly the hardcore SSF star there, where you can get your defenses borderline for free. So when I saw this, no big deal. Inferno Clasp was actually removed from the game temporarily as well, and we re-added back into the game later on, they say at some point, so that's also like an indirect nerf to this. But just to give you, if fair is fair, I see this one and I think, okay, yeah, that I get it. Now, there's supposed to be new, affixes kind of similar to the Smith one here, where the armor also applies to elemental damage from hits. In fact, here it is, added new suffix modifier that can roll strength on strength armors from level 33. The grant percentage of armor applies to elemental damage. So you might think to yourself, okay, so, there's maybe some changes here that people are concerned about in relation, to the warrior, but now you guys are getting the ability of armor applies to elemental damage. Now, my understanding from the Ziggy Q&A is that this is mitigated before elemental resistance actually kicks in. Therefore, you are getting a percentage reduction from the armor formula off the elemental, and then the resistance kicks in, not afterwards with the number that is post mitigation resistance. And the reason that this matters is because armor is worse the bigger the hit gets. So if the resistance actually mitigated it first, then the hit that's basically getting mitigated then in terms of how the armor would work on it is smaller, meaning the armor is more effective. I mean, that's the way that my understanding of this currently works. And so if that is the case and my understanding is correct, then this would probably not be that good. So then the other argument one could make is you could say, okay, well, DM, you just said the block was actually very good and that people were using it all of the time. So therefore, wouldn't a change in block not really be that surprising and maybe be mandated? I could see that argument. I'd say sure, but you have to understand when you're playing, a bottom left tree character. It doesn't necessarily have to be a warrior. That armor and life, or, these are your defensive layers, and life has been seen to soar the lower end. You can get 7K-ish, maybe life on some of, the higher end on a really well-built warrior, and they say that a really well-built warrior is supposed to be able to survive more than a really well-built energy shield character on the higher end. But, more on the medium end of a character, to be quite honest with you, can be pretty hard to get those life numbers. So maybe I could see this and think, I could be talked into this argument about how maybe this is an overall okay change. maybe the tree gives us some more life. Maybe some of our defensive layers comes from elsewhere. But then we go look at something called Giant's Blood. And the reason that this one matters for the purposes of this conversation is because Giant's Blood allows you to put a two-handed mace in one hand. And why would you want to do that? Well, of course, to wear as shield. So if you're going to be having a shield that has been changed, you're also going to be running the Giant's Blood. Let's be honest, one-handed maces are bad. You're probably not going to be using that unless, again, there's a shitload of buffs to one-handed maces that are not represented within the patch notes somewhere. Now, if you look at this says that the Giant's Blood Keystone passive skill now halves the amount of life granted by strength. And if that is the scenario, for instance, my Smith of Katava right now is 631 strength. And not just because of the attribute requirements. I have seen this argument pop up where it's, hey, well, don't worry, you guys are receiving less attribute requirements. It means it's going to be easier for you because you have that triple requirement in Giant's Blood. You're getting like a triple tap to that. That actually doesn't matter because you're going to be trying to get as much life as you possibly can have anyway. And how does one get life? Again, we come back to strength. So you're going to be trying to get strength literally anyway. Again, a well-built warrior is going to have a lot of strength and probably overcapped on the requirement. Now, there is an argument to be made. Maybe eventually they come out with new bases and the new attribute requirements helps a bit on the higher bases. Maybe because of this, you can use a hammer a little bit easier for a more mid-game build, and in that case, it might matter. But in that scenario, okay, that person needs every bit of life they can get from strength. And what's Giant's Blood do? Well, now it halves the amount of life that you granted from strength as well. So this actually, in my opinion, hits those sort of mid-build warriors actually fairly significantly hard, where reducing 400 or 500 life from a build is actually very massive. Now, these reasons are why when I see this, I think, if I'm going to start a hardcore trade, for instance, I probably am not going to run Warrior, but just in general, like maybe it's time to play something else. Because while these are negatives associated with what I'm seeing from the Warrior tree, eventually someone might work it out and it might work better. Maybe you get some new items in the game or something that work out just fine. Sure. So we could hand wave it if we really wanted to, but objectively it looks quite bad just looking at the patch notes. Now, the other classes have some really fun mechanics being added to the game that seem much more interesting to me than playing with a little bit of a hamstringed warrior. Pathfinder has changes to the concoction where you can actually like pop the poisons. Deadeye seems absolutely nutty. I mean, you get projectiles chained to marked enemies, and the new cold shots meta skill that repeatedly marks enemies for you, bypassing your mark limit. If you thought Deadeye was good, I mean, strap in for 0.3. Invoker's still Invoker, though Overflow did get nerfed from being able to go to 2x to 1.5x. So Meditate did take a bit of a hit there. Now, the Acolyte of Chalupa guy here, this one is actually maybe the starter for me. Just looks super fun. I mean, we have a bunch of changes in here, but might I direct you to a couple down here nearer the bottom, okay? Look at this one here. Instead, it now grounds 1 volatility on inflicting elemental element and take no damage from volatility. So you can just use volatility for free. If you don't know what volatility is, it's the affected target takes 100 physical damage per stack of volatility you have on you. So that's what the damage you're not taking. But then you gain 1% of damage as extra chaos damage per stack for 10 seconds. And it goes up to a cap of 200 stacks. And you're gaining it on doing elemental elements. Well, for read the next one here, it's been renamed to Unraveling. You no longer grant recharge energy shield or mana leech. Instead, now it grants chaos damage from hits. Also contribute to ignite chance and magnitude, freeze buildup, or shock chance changing every 2 seconds. So you're also inflicting elements here. Also, the Cast on Freeze, Shock, and Ignite have been combined into a single gem. Cast on Elemental Elements. So we also have a meta gem, which is now basically just better here. That combo seems pretty fun. Also, this right here, Mortar Cannon, raise a cannon totem which uses socketed grenade skills. Seems like, obviously, this would be super fun too. Somebody in one of the chats somewhere I was reading said that they think a tighter Morton Cannon is going to be their starter. And I thought, that does sound fun. But then again, I guess we're right back to Warrior. I also thought Chronomancer looked like fun. I don't know how good this would actually be, but it just sounds like fun. You lose the Unleash skill, but now you have a skill called Inevitable Agony, which curses all targets in an area after a short delay, causing a portion of damage they take from hits to be stored in the curse debuff. When the debuff expires, they take that stored damage again all at once. So it's kind of like a Zed alt from League of Legends. And then instead of the 50% cast speed every 5 seconds, there's the Sands of Time, which starts with 60% cast speed and 60% AoE, and then scales down to 1% and then just keeps re-looping over and over and over again. Then we go to what might actually be the league starter. Now, I was thinking about doing like this unarmed monk, like hollowed palm. I think it's probably going to be the most popular build just because it looks fun and it was in the trailer and all that. And it seems obvious and you don't have to have a weapon. So doing it on start might be fun. But if you look at the Stormweaver here, okay, now, if you forget the Tempest Caller, Elemental Storm shit, no one really cares. If you scroll down here and look at this, the Force of Will nor the Bow skill no longer does 1% increased effective Arcane Surge per 25 mana, but now grants 25 or 20% of damage is taken from mana before life and 20% increased magnitude of Arcane Surge on you per 10% missing mana. So this is like a build that ramps with your mana, effectively being missing here. And because you have the damage taken from mana and there's the Sock of the Bows that allow you to take in damage from mana too, you can actually fairly easily get to 100% of damage is taken from mana before life without running Mind Over Matter, which allows you not to have the penalty of the mana being slower to regen. So I thought this looked super fun paired with Arc, for instance, which is actually one of my favorite builds I ever played back in PoE 1 during Affliction League. And then there's the whole new infusion mechanic. Now, if you don't know how the infusion mechanic actually works, effectively the way infusions work is there is now these things called infusions that when you're using like elemental spells are going to be added as an infusion. If you use code, you get like a code infusion, a fire, electric, etc. And then those are added in to the other elemental spells you're doing to give like new mechanics. Now, in concept, it actually looked really cool. Now, when I was reading through the patch notes, though, I was mildly disappointed with the mechanic because I noticed that they took away some things from some of the base abilities to add them back as mechanics. For instance, like Firestorm, the AoE got smaller and then actually gets wider as you add in infusions. There's an argument to be made depending on how the density works. Maybe the smaller is actually better, for instance. Or like in the case of Incinerate, like it removes the burning ground, but then adds it back in if you have infusion. So the whole concept of like taking something out to put it back in as an infusion is a little weird, but it's not on all of the skills. Some of the skills literally just get new things added. So the concept of infusions itself actually seemed just super fun. So there's a few builds in here when I was picking through the patch notes immediately come to mind like, okay, we have Monk, we have Stormweaver. I guess you could do the Mortar Cannon and Titan thing if you really wanted to. If you look at Lightning Spear, for instance, like you would think when you look at this, that this thing would have been gutted, but it's not really that gutted. No longer deals more damage when consuming a frenzy charge. I mean, that is a pretty big nerf, but that isn't actually massively nerfed. And then if you look at Tangle Tongue here, this is a nerf in terms of crit chance. It goes plus 5 to 8% instead of 10 to 20, which basically just was absolutely insane. So it's harder to get max crit. But this is actually like still playable. If you look at Tangle Tongue, I think that's still playable, and Lightning Spear looks still playable. So, I mean, you literally could redo the same build. Now, I think there's one thing that's true from reading through this, and I guess we're going to find out with passive skill tree, etc. when the game actually comes out. I'm sure someone will find a super meta build that everyone will be playing again, because that's always how it works with ARPGs. But I do read this, and I see that there's a lot of different things you can actually do in relation to builds coming this league. And I really hope with the addition of like the support gems being able to be on like literally everything the new lineage supports, that we're not going to have a league in which one build absolutely reigns supreme, that people are constantly coming up with new builds. It does look like a bit of a theory crafters league. And so that is going to be very exciting. I would love to see every class has some kind of super good build that lots of people are using, and that would be one of the things I think if you're looking forward to a league where it's not just Lightning Spear, I think that's something you could look forward to. So I'm having a bit of a rough time deciding what I want to do. I might just start Arc and like try to make Arc work, or I might end up getting baited in the Hollow Palm like it seems like everyone's going to do. But besides that, one thing is for sure for me, which is I just don't think I'm going to be starting Warrior this time. I had a bit of a giggle about this morning, because I looked at Twitter here and what popped up, but Jung Roan's photo, and it says, "Don't choose warriors." It's translated from the Chinese live stream where they got their hands on it. Sounds about right to me. Anyway, boys, love you all. See you on the live stream today.